morning of April 20th, 1992 arrived in an eerie silence. Robert Alton Harris lay in a restless sleep in his freezing cell at San Quentin State Prison, the wind from the open window seeping in and numbing every millimeter of his skin. He didn't need to close his eyes to see the nightmares. They had been there for a long time, since 14 years ago, since the day the two teenagers, John Maskey and Michael Baker, died at his hands. Those two names were no longer human, just ghosts that haunted Harris in every last breath of his life. Back then, Harris needed a car to carry out the bank robbery. He kidnapped the two boys, drove them to a remote area, and then shot them in the head. Then, Harris sat down and ate the remaining hamburgers from the victims' hands, an act so cold that even the court shuddered when hearing the testimony again. Now, 14 years later, California is preparing to carry out its first death sentence since 1967. A quarter of a century without anyone being executed, long enough for the entire system to become unfamiliar with this ritual. San Quentin is no longer accustomed to legal killings, and it was that very strangeness that caused tension to permeate the entire prison block like an invisible poisonous haze. The heavy steel door creaked open. 4 officers entered Harris's cell to conduct the pre-execution search procedure, a mandatory ritual aimed at removing any items that could interfere with the execution process. The toilet was opened for inspection. Walls and iron bars were tapped inch by inch, searching for secret compartments. Harris's pillows and mattress were confiscated and x-rayed at the adjustment center. They searched for weapons, contraband, or even pens and paper, anything that could derail the plan. But there's nothing. Harris sat quietly, watching them search. He knows there's nothing to find. He just needs time. Breakfast was brought as usual: scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. Harris barely touched it. Outside the cell block, San Quentin moves to an unusual rhythm. The footsteps of the guards were heavier. Their voices dropped almost to a whisper. All 1,500 prisoners were completely locked down in their cells. No work, no yard time, no movement. An execution is not just the death of one person, it shakes the entire prison. The lockdown order ensures order, prevents chaos, and keeps tensions from escalating into riots. And today, everything must be under absolute control. At 6 p.m., visiting hours end. Brother Harris, Randall, held his sister tightly. "I love you, Robbie." His voice choked. The guards didn't allow them to touch each other much, but that hug was an exception. His friend Michael Kroll pressed his cheek against Harris, but even that brief gesture caught the guards' attention. Lawyer Michael Lawrence stood in the corner of the room, still desperately trying to appeal, still fighting every second. But time is running out, and everyone knows it. 10 minutes after saying goodbye to his family, Harris was stripped naked for a final inspection, a mandatory security measure. Then he was taken to a waiting cell just 15 paces from the gas chamber. It was a small, narrow, cold space with no bed, just a mattress on the concrete floor. Warden Daniel Vasquez came in to visit him. "Robert, how's everything going? Is it okay?" Harris nodded. "Yes, Warden, everything's fine." Then he asked again, "And what about you, Warden?" Vasquez paused for a moment. Then Harris added with a thin smile, "When I get where I'm going, I'll speak well of you to God." Vasquez later recounted that he thought to himself, "I don't know where he'll go after this death, or if he'll go anywhere at all. But if he goes anywhere, I hope he doesn't mention me. I don't want him to say anything to the devil at all." In the American tradition of capital punishment, the last meal is not just a rite, it's a ritual. A final pardon from the state for the man they are about to kill. Harris chose a bucket of KFC fried chicken, 2 pizzas, 6 cans of Pepsi, a bag of gummy bears, and 2 packs of Camel cigarettes. He shared that meal with Leon Harris, his cousin, and a Baptist minister from Mobile, Alabama, whom he chose as his spiritual advisor. Leon entered the cell at 6:39 p.m. and was locked in the next room. They pray together. Leon reads the Bible. Harris barely eats. Leon recalled, "There were no beds in there, just a mattress on the floor. He rolled it up to make a seat, but he doesn't sit down much. He walks around a lot, back and forth, back and forth. The weight is eating away at Harris from the inside. Outside, television channels had set up tents, and reporters stood in front of the cameras giving live reports. Robert Alton Harris is currently in death row, just a few steps away from San Quentin's gas chamber. But less than 2 hours before the execution was scheduled for 12 a.m., it was still uncertain whether California would carry out its first execution in a quarter of a century. 2 hours before the execution, nothing is certain. Harris's legal team, along with the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, have repeatedly filed last-minute appeal, one after another, each requiring a response from the court. A witness later recalled, "It went on all night." The fate of Robert Alton Harris hangs in the balance between life and death, between law and conscience. The debate is not just about Harris's crimes, but about the method of execution itself. Is cyanide gas a humane way to die, or is it just a legalized form of torture? The judges argued fiercely. Meanwhile, the execution team had assembled. They think there's no more delay, no more appeals. This is the final moment, but fate, or the court, still hasn't let him go. The phone rings. Harris's lawyer believes, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is that your execution has been postponed. The bad news is that there's only 4 hours." Just before midnight, the court intervened again. The judges are still debating. The execution team was ordered to prepare Harris. The warden entered the cell, accompanied by 2 prison officials. There isn't much to say, just a brief exchange between the dying person and the one overseeing their death. 5 minutes later, the process began. At the warden's verbal command, the lieutenant in charge of the gas chamber stepped forward and unlocked the cell. "Take off all your clothes. Even socks have to come off." A guard entered, handing Harris a pair of blue jeans and a blue shirt. That was all he was allowed to wear. Harris changed clothes in silence. "I'm ready to enter the gas chamber." 57 witnesses were led into the witness room. The families and friends of both Harris and the victim, state witnesses, and reporters. They stood in a crescent shape surrounding the gas chamber. Michael Kroll, a friend of Harris, later described it as half-modern, half-medieval instrument. This gas chamber isn't made of shiny stainless steel. It's an old machine that hasn't changed since 1941. The execution squad led Harris in. He walked with a calmness that was almost frightening. His hair was neatly combed and his clothes were tidy. He chatted with the guards, exchanged light-hearted words, and even smiled at some of them. But for the victim's family, it was something entirely different. A sneer on their lips, a proud gait. A witness saw the man flaunting. Others only see a criminal who has never shown remorse. They led him to the metal chair marked with the letter A. There are 2 identical chairs in the chamber, perforated and bolted to the floor, built for the rare occasions when California executes 2 people at once. 2 officers tied him down while the third checked each buckle. Harris did not resist. Turning away from the witness room, he craned his neck to look for familiar faces. Then, he waited. At the warden's command, the process began. The gas has been released into the gas chamber. But a few seconds later, the phone rang again. 2 long, piercing rings. The whole room is freezing. From the witness area, a sudden cry rang out. "Oh my God, no, postpone for the 4th time." The warden gave the order. "Harris will not be returned to death row. I will stay in the waiting room. The legal battle is not over yet." Leon Harris, the pastor and cousin of the condemned man, stood and watched. Exhaustion enveloped Robert like an invisible shroud. He sat hunched over on the rolled-up mattress, his head bowed, almost saying nothing. Then, the cold hit. A guard passed the blanket through the bars. Harris hoisted it onto his shoulder, but it still didn't move. Leon could never forget that image. Harris wrapped in a blanket, head bowed, silent. And he just kept waiting. Before the cameras, California Attorney General Dan Lundgren stated clearly, "There is no legitimate reason for this abuse of discretion, compounded by last-minute efforts to manipulate the judicial system." The battle over Harris's fate has reached the nation's highest court. After the final postponement, the U.S. Supreme Court made an unprecedented decision: no further postponements. The execution will take place at 6 a.m. Prison spokesperson Vernell Crittenden told the warden, "We're ready." The first light of morning stretched across San Francisco Bay. Inside at 6:05 a.m., Harris was led back to the gas chamber for the second time. The door was as heavy as a submarine, closing tightly behind him with the whoosh of the rubber seal. 57 witnesses were present, the victim's family, journalists, and government officials. They stood silently, their eyes fixed on the thick glass window frame. In the soundproof booth, Harris turned toward the victim's family. His lips mouthed two words that no one heard, but everyone understood. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." No warning. The lever is pulled. Sodium cyanide pellets fell into the sulfuric acid container below the seat. The gas began to rise, a thick, invisible, but deadly white cloud. This gas chamber was built in 1941, a relic from a time when California still believed that lethal gas was a more humane method than the electric chair or hanging. But humanity is a relative term. Dan Moraine, a reporter for the Los Angeles Times, captured the haunting scene in an article the following day. Harris's body was initially motionless, his head bowed. The first sign of death was a twitch in his hand, as if the gas had burned his skin. He inhaled and exhaled 4, maybe 5 times. His head snapped back, his eyes rolling white, empty, lifeless. 30 seconds later, his head slumped, his body stiffening against the straps. Then, with an unnatural force, his head snapped back again before falling forward, slowly, as if the weight of death were pulling him down. In the witness room, no one moved. Some people closed their eyes, some cried. The victim's family stared. Some saw justice, some saw only empty revenge. The Harris family turned away, unable to bear the sight. Michael Kroll, a friend of Harris, later recounted, "I stood there and watched a man slowly die. There's nothing quick or humane about it." At 6:21 a.m., Warden Daniel Vasquez announced that death row inmate B. Soto III was dead. 16 minutes, that's the time it takes for cyanide gas to take a life. In the press conference that followed, Vasquez read aloud Harris's final words. "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone has to dance with death." It was the first execution in California in 25 years. It ushered in a new era, or rather, closed an old one. In the years that followed, California would carry out 13 more executions before the gas chamber method was banned in 1996, being replaced by lethal injection. But Harris will forever be the last person to die in San Quentin's gas chamber, a symbol of brutality and the endless debate surrounding the death penalty. The question remains, hanging in the air like white smoke in the glass chamber. Is a monster like Harris worth so many last-minute appeals? Or is every delay just an abuse of the court? And if we kill the killers, how are we any different from them?